In 2014, the first publicly available Bitcoin exchange, one that at its peak facilitated 70% of Bitcoin's total trading volume, declared bankruptcy. In its wake, tens of thousands of people lost a combined 850,000 Bitcoins, and at today's price of around $63,000, that's a $53.5 billion loss. What could have caused a capitulation of this magnitude? This is the tale of the now infamous Mt. GOX exchange. Well, first of all, Mt. GOX wasn't built for Bitcoin. It wasn't even built for finance. Back in 2006, a programmer named Jet McCaleb had an idea. What if players of the online card game Magic the Gathering could trade their virtual cards like stocks on an open exchange? In January 2007, he bought the domain name for it, mtgox.com, short for Magic the Gathering Online Exchange. That's where the name actually comes from. The site actually went live for a few months in 2007, then McCaleb lost interest and moved on to other projects. The domain just sat there. Then, in July 2010, McCaleb read about this new thing called Bitcoin on a tech forum and had a realization. Bitcoin needed a proper exchange, somewhere people could trade it for real currency. He had a spare, memorable domain sitting around doing nothing. So he repurposed mtgox.com, and the Mt. GOX, the Bitcoin exchange, was born. McCaleb didn't stick around for long, however. In March 2011, he sold the site to Marc Karpelé, a French developer living in Japan. And under Karpelé, Mt. GOX exploded. By 2013, riding Bitcoin's first real bull run, the price went from around $13 to over $1,200 that year. Mt. GOX was handling over 70% of all Bitcoin transactions worldwide. If you wanted to buy or sell Bitcoin in 2013, there was a good chance you were doing it through Mt. GOX. It has first mover advantage, a recognizable brand in a tiny industry, and by simple network effect, it became where the liquidity was, which made it where most liquidity wanted to go. What almost nobody knew at the time, including apparently Mt. GOX itself, was that the company had already been hemorrhaging Bitcoin for almost 2 years. To understand this hack, you need to understand one file, wallet.dat. Think of wallet.dat like a physical keyring sitting in an unlocked drawer. Before September 2011, the standard Bitcoin software didn't encrypt this file. It just stored your private key, the actual cryptographic proof that lets you spend your coins, in plain text. If someone got a copy of that file, they didn't need to hack anything ever again. They already had a spare set of keys to every coin in that wallet. Bitcoin only added the ability to encrypt this file with a password in version 0.4.0, released September 23, 2011. Sometime around September 2011, just before that fix has shipped, attackers got their hands on a copy of Mt. GOX wallet.dat file. Nobody has ever definitively confirmed how the private key has been stolen, a direct hack, a compromised backup, or an inside job. What it's confirmed is what happens next. From late 2011 through mid-2013, the attackers quietly and continuously drained coins from the addresses tied to the stolen file. And here's the part that sounds almost too strange to be true. Because customers keep depositing new coins to the same addresses they always used, a common if sloppy exchange practice obviously, the well never ran dry. Every time a customer sent fresh Bitcoin to their usual deposit address, they were unknowingly topping up the very wallet the attackers already had the keys to. It gets stranger. Mt. GOX's own accounting system sometimes misread the attackers' outgoing thefts as incoming deposits, crediting random customers with Bitcoin they never should have been received, adding an estimated 40,000 Bitcoin of phantom balance to the platform books. Imagine a bank robber emptying a vault and then the bank's own ledger recording it as a deposit instead of a withdrawal. That's roughly what has happened silently for nearly 2 years. Mt. GOX has no idea of any of this happening. By the time it was finally uncovered, US federal prosecutors would later allege that approximately 647,000 bitcoins had been stolen this way, one of the largest thefts of value in financial history, executed not through some dramatic single break-in, but through a slow, patient, year-long bleed that nobody at the company actually noticed. By February 2014, the wheels were fully off. On February 7th, Mt. Gox halted all Bitcoin withdrawals, blaming a bug called transaction malleability, a real, if minor, quirks in how Bitcoin transaction could be altered in the network before confirmation. At the time, this was presented as the reason customers couldn't get their money out. In reality, we now know that the actual hole in Mt. Gox balance sheet had been forming since 2011. Malleability was, at best, a symptom the company could point to publicly, not the actual cause of the missing coins. On February 24th, Mt. Gox suspended all trading. Its website went dark. 6 other major Bitcoin exchanges released a joint statement publicly distancing themselves from Mt. Gox that same day, a sign of how seriously the rest of the young industry took what was unfolded. On February 28, 2014, Mt. Gox filed for a form of bankruptcy protection in Tokyo. The number it disclosed was staggering. The company admitted to losing approximately 850,000 bitcoins, about 750 of those to customers, and 100,000 belonging to the company itself, worth around $473 million at that time. That represents roughly 7% of every Bitcoin in existence gone. A few weeks later, on March 20, the company found 199,999.99 Bitcoin sitting in an old digital wallet used before June 2011, bringing the confirmed loss down to about 650,000 Bitcoin. Mt. Gox also filed for bankruptcy protection in the United States on March 9th to pause a wave of lawsuits from American customers. By mid-April, the company gave up on any plan to reorganize and asked the Tokyo court to move straight to full liquidation. The market felt it immediately. Between February and March of 2014, the price of Bitcoin fell by roughly 36% amid the crisis, a brutal preview of what a single point of failure in a young, concentrated market can do to the whole ecosystem. The victims were enormous in number. The bankruptcy trustee ultimately recognized approximately 127,000 creditors, ranging from small retail holders to larger institutional players, scattered across the globe. Whether they still in crypto today is genuinely mixed. Some undoubtedly walk away from the space entirely after a decade of frozen funds and false starts, while others who held onto their claims ended up, ironically, benefiting enormously. It's not a story with one clean emotional through line. Some feel vindicated, some feel scarred, and plenty probably feel both. As for the response from Carpelle and the team, Carpelle resigns from the Bitcoin Foundation board on February 23, just before trading was suspended. Amid protests forming outside Mt. Gox Tokyo offices, the company moved location, citing security concerns. In its official statement, Mt. Gox said it believed there is a high possibility that the Bitcoins were stolen, pointing the blame squarely at hackers, while offering little clarity to the thousands of customers who couldn't access their money now. So, who was convicted? Well, Mark Carpelle was arrested in Japan in August 2015, charged with fraud, embezzlement, and separately from the missing coin entirely, manipulating Mt. Gox's own system to inflate the balance in an account he controlled. In March 2019, a Tokyo court found him guilty only on the data falsification charge, inflating the company holdings by about $33.5 million, and sentenced him to 30 months suspended for 4 years. That means he served no prison time provided he didn't re-offend. He was acquitted of the embezzlement and breach of trust charges. The court found no evidence of criminal intent here. Well, to be clear, Carpelle has never been convicted of stealing the missing Bitcoin itself. So, who's the hacker actually? Well, for years, this was one of the crypto's biggest open questions. In 2023, the US Department of Justice unsealed charges, originally filed back in 2019 against two Russian nationals, Alexei Bilyuchenko and Alexander Werner, accusing them of hacking Mt. GOX Japan-based servers starting in September 2011 and stealing roughly 647,000 Bitcoin through May 2014. Neither man has been arrested by US authorities. Both remain at large as fugitives. Here's a strange wrinkle. Bilyuchenko was separately convicted in Russia. A Moscow court upheld the verdict in March 2024 for embezzling funds from an entirely different exchange, WEX, and received a 3.5-year sentence there. So he has faced consequences, just not for Mt. GOX, and definitely not from the US. Even stranger, wallets linked to Bilyuchenko are still active. On-chain analysts tracked roughly $114 million in Bitcoin moved out of this wallet in a single week in December 2025 alone, with an estimated $360 million still sitting there. More than a decade after the theft, the alleged hacker is still slowly cashing out in plain sight on a public blockchain while remaining free for his crime. So, who actually laundered the money? Well, Alexander Vinnik, an operator of the Bitcoin e-exchange, is accused of laundering roughly 300,000 of the stolen Mt. GOX Bitcoin through that platform. He was arrested in Greece in 2017, extradited to France in 2020, where he was convicted of money laundering and served a 5-year sentence. Then extradited to the US in 2022, where he pleaded guilty in May of 2024 to conspiracy to commit money laundering. Why has it taken so long to repay victims? Well, several compounding delays occurred. The initial rehabilitation attempt collapsed in 2014, forcing a shift to full liquidation. A $75 million breach of contract lawsuit from a former Mt. GOX partner, CoinLab, tied up proceedings for years before eventually being resolved. Creditors didn't even approve a repayment plan until October 2021. And verifying the identities and claims of 127,000 creditors across dozens of countries, then coordinating the actual distribution through partner exchanges like Kraken and Bitstamp has simply been a massive logistical undertaking, and it takes time. Actual repayments finally begin in July 2024, a full decade after the collapse. As of March 2025, about 19,500 creditors had received distribution in Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. The final repayment deadline has now been pushed back 3 times. Originally, October 2023, then October 2024, and October 2025, and now as the most recent extension, October 31st, 2036. The trustee still holds roughly 34,689 Bitcoin, worth about $4 billion, earmarked for the remaining repayments. Separately, and outside that legitimate process entirely, the funds linked to the accused hacker Bilyuchenko appears to be still sitting in his own wallet, only now trickling onto exchanges more than a decade later. Not your keys, not your coin. Isn't just a slogan. It's exactly what 127,000 people learned the hard way. When an exchange holds your private key, you're not really an owner of that asset safely in your account. You're a creditor in line, hoping the company survives long enough, and honestly long enough afterwards, to pay you back. Mt. GOX also shows what happens when a huge share of an entire market's liquidity sits behind one company's security practice. A single stolen file didn't just bankrupt one business, it shook the price of Bitcoin itself and left a scar that took over a decade to even partially heal. So guys, if you like this content, make sure to click like, subscribe, and probably share this to your friends and family. Anyways, stay safe guys, stay curious, and I'll see you guys next time.